We've got him, none other than Representative Jeremy Munson on the line with us today, and I can't thank him enough. We are live on the Facebook Zoomy thing, just so you know, sir. Thank you for being on the program.
Thanks for having me on again, Al.
Oh, it is our pleasure because you cover just about everything. I actually am now Facebook stalking you. I liked you, whatever you want to call it. I'll tell you what. I had to read a couple of the stories we're going to talk about 2 times because I didn't know if it was like that Bumblebee thing where it's like a fake story, but it's kind of a true story, but it's not. I would like very much someday that we are a colorless society, right? That we get through racism, all that good stuff. We no longer like the whole don't look at anybody except for the contact of I would love to get there. But you posted a thing from Fox 9 News. They literally did this thing where my neighborhood could be racist because of the trees or the quantity of trees in my neighborhood. What else can we look for? How is that even possible? How do we get beyond it? If we're going to look at neighborhoods and say, you got more of these trees, so this is a racist neighborhood, I'm missing something.
Yeah, and this was a study, a nationwide study that was that people of color have fewer trees that they live around. And you know, I just when they're trying to tie it to race and policy in the cities, talking about how many trees they put in certain neighborhoods. I've really had enough of all these kind of dumb studies. We need to give everybody equal opportunity, and maybe we could do studies based on economic outcome or something, but to always tie everything to race is so frustrating because we see a lot of the policy coming through the legislature that's completely charged with race funding targeting certain races over other policies that are based on race, and it just further divides us as a society.
Well, and that's where I'm going with this. So I don't know who planted the trees in my front yard because they planted them 100 years ago and I wasn't around. I don't know what that guy's politics were. I moved in the house because I kind of like the house had a tree or two. If you're going to live in the big city, you might not have many trees. I get it, but that's a choice. You live in the big city, you have less trees. But here's where I'm going with this. Like you say, who paid for this study? Are we literally, is this funded by government? Because if I'm not mistaken, $1.7 billion in the transportation bill was some crazy thing about building a tunnel over I-94, like a human walking bridge with flora and fauna and buildings on top, to connect a neighborhood that was dissected when 94 went through. That's before Al. That's BA time. That's before Al was even born. I'm sorry, but by now, if you didn't like where the road went, you could have moved.
Yeah, and that's the Rondo neighborhood, which is very near the Capitol on Highway 94 in St. Paul. And basically what they're going to do is turn 94 into a tunnel and build buildings back on top because a neighborhood was divided when that freeway came through. I mean, if we want to talk about actually changing policy to prevent that type of thing before, we should address eminent domain laws and how the government kind of goes in and does these takings and can actually just take people's property. I mean, we support freeways, but there's maybe better places for them, or we have to be careful in how we divide people's neighborhoods in doing that.
And I don't disagree with it, but when was 94 put in? I mean,
in the 1950s, I think.
Okay, so 1950s, they probably did a bad thing. I get it. So now we're going to put a $1.7 billion top on top of the thing and think that fixes the problem?
Yeah, the transportation bill that we just voted on about 15 minutes ago did have about $6.2 million to design that Rondo Bridge. What do they call it? Whatever the thing is called. Yeah. But it was taken out after there were so many people upset about it. So that was stripped out. But unfortunately, what was not in the bill that I had hoped would be was some language that would prevent the governor from unilaterally implementing California car emissions in vehicle standards in Minnesota, where they can tell the dealers which cars they can sell and what quantities. I mean, you got California where the number one car is like a Honda Civic, and in Minnesota, it's a Ford F-150. So how can you take their assortment of cars that they sell in California or that they're mandated to sell, and then implement the same standards here in Minnesota?
Well, talk me through this, if you will, Representative, because maybe I'm missing something. How does the governor have that power to tell my local Ford guy down here he's got to put some Fiestas on the lot because it's going to get a better gas mileage, even though no one's buying the Fiesta down here? How has he got the power to do that? and this California emission standard, why do we got to follow that? When do we vote in the California emission standard?
Yeah, unfortunately, the courts have decided that the governor does have this authority, and it's from legislation that Republicans gave the governor back when Pawlenty was in charge, to implement some clean air standards, or the green energy junk that Pawlenty pushed for all the windmills and stuff. And so they're using that language in law to allow the governor to unilaterally make these decisions without legislative input, without the voice of the people, really. And I think it's pig-headed to do that. And we don't have the technology today. We have great electric cars, but there's not enough minerals in the world to make the batteries to power these vehicles. And of course, that brings us into the sourcing of the materials, which includes slavery. There are not electric vehicles made that don't use slavery in the supply chain, which is one of the biggest issues that I've been spearheading at the Capitol.
Well, didn't they just settle the Supreme Court just settle some lawsuit? Somebody was being sued, and I don't remember the company now, which is too bad on my part. But basically, we're being sued for using slave labor in other countries to make whatever product they needed, the mineral stuff. And actually, the company won because the Supreme Court says we really can't do anything about what happens outside the U.S.
Yeah, and I think that was like a chocolate company. They were sourcing their chocolate beans from using slavery, and that's you can't sue a company based on that. But we should not be using taxpayer dollars and sending it to slave owners in other parts of the world to mandate we buy products. And that comes with solar too, because the Chinese have rounded up and put into concentration camps over 1 million Muslims of this ethnic minority called Uyghurs. They put them in forced labor camps, and they're making solar panels for the U.S. market. I mean, it's just, if you spend an hour online, you can read all these legitimate, basically left-leaning magazines, Politico and others, in Time Magazine and Newsweek, that are putting this on the display for the world to see, and nobody cares. But, for private purchases is one thing. You can make your own decision whether you buy a cell phone that has cobalt from the Congo, but to mandate that we have to buy these products when we're not addressing the supply chain. And every Democrat in the Minnesota House voted against an amendment that would ban slavery from solar panel purchases when they just passed the Energy and Commerce bill the other day, which mandates that we buy these products and puts them on top of schools.
See, what's crazy about this, especially with the car thing, and I'm going to get the California car guy on, the Minnesota Automobile Dealers Association guy, and I'm going to dig deep into this. But what I don't get about it is you're down here in southern Minnesota, and you can't buy an F-150 pickup truck. You can't find them. This is what people want down here. You go ahead and put all the electric cars you want in the parking lot at the Hawks, and it's going to sit there. How do you make people have to buy that? And how do you make the car dealers have to put it on their lot? I'm not sure how you can say car standard emissions and that just all of a sudden their business model changes what people want and what they don't. I don't think it works like that.
Well, I tell you what, I'd love to be a car dealer right now in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or in Des Moines, Iowa, because these guys are going to be doing gangbuster business, and Minnesotans are going to suffer. Our sales tax revenue is going to fall. Our roads are going to get worse because Walz is making these stupid decisions.
I want to go to break, but I want to go with a somber note here so we can come back and not have to do it in the mix of stuff. I don't know if you saw, I shared one of your posts about this corporal that's coming through town tomorrow. Who is deceased, and I want to put it out there. I want to talk about it real quickly if we can to spread the good word. I put it on my post. I've talked about it a couple of times, and I'm going to get his name wrong. Corporal Eric John Nis de Jesus. He passed away, and if I'm going to get that right too. He passed away. I want to get it right here.
He was in Japan at a military base.
Yes, and it was an ocean swimming tragedy. He had died, 24 years old. He's one of our own, and he is coming back tomorrow. And they're going to get him, and I see I'll get him back for us. He'll be at the airport, Minneapolis airport, about 1:51. And on your website, on your Facebook page and mine, it does show the path that he will be taken on. And what you're asking, and I would hope people can, if they will, roughly in this area, 3:30, 4 o'clock. If you can line 169 and follow that route, be there to welcome this young man back. I think there's something we could do here. Yeah,
and in Highway 60, once you get past Mankato down to Mountain Lake, so St. James, Madelia, places that on my Facebook page you can go to, or Al's page to find those locations. It's going to be a great show of support for the family.
And it will be. Bring your flags and that sort of thing. Here's a guy died while serving our country, a 24-year-old man. He had his whole life in front of him. Representative Munson, I thank you for finding that and putting that out there. I don't know where you got it. I just read it on your page. I'm like, I got to get that out there. Thank you for doing that. We'll talk more politics after this. That'd be me. I'm Al Travis. I thank you very much for being a part of the program. On with us this half hour, Representative Jeremy Munson. I thank you very much for being here. I love the public service announcement you're giving out. I think it's very healthy information. I think people need to know about this. If you have not gotten your shot yet, one or two, you only have a week to go, and all the goodies that the governor threw out, that expires. That's good to remember. A lot of folks wouldn't have thought about that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I made sure that I shared that on social media because the governor did say, reminder, there's 1 week left for Minnesotans to get vaccinated and earn a reward.
Well, let me ask you this, because things got a little mucky. The World Health Organization came out and said, we're not too sure we'd do kids just yet. Let's do some research on it. The CDC says, of course, let's get them shots done. Tim Walz was giving out free beer, and a whole list of different prizes. We're never going to hit 70% in the next week, are we?
I don't think we're going to hit 70%. No. And yeah, I mean, it was the World Health Organization has been, they're focused on world health. Obviously, they're looking at data all around the world. In their website, they had put out there that children not be vaccinated. And it said there's not evidence on the use of vaccines against COVID in children to make recommendations for children to be vaccinated. And children and adolescents tend to have milder disease compared to adults. And they're just looking at the numbers and they're saying it doesn't make sense. There is a risk. There's kids that are, dying from the vaccine in very low numbers, or it's very rare. But that's what they put out there. And so a lot of people were sharing that information, and Facebook actually fact checked it and said that it's misleading. I was like,
WHO was misleading everybody.
Yeah.
Let me tell this at you though, as far as Minnesota politics go. The governor has still got some executive powers. I think Ms. Horton was talking about it might be one of those things he could give up to make this session go away, to get done with this session. New York governor canceled it. They're done on Thursday. No, they no longer have a state of emergency. Is the pressure enough that he's going to fold whether we get to 70 or not?
Yeah, so I want to make it very clear to listeners. The governor has these powers because they're put into law by the legislature years ago. And he all he has to do is declare an emergency for whatever reason, and he then has unilateral lawmaking authority. What a lot of people are saying, we need to end the emergency, but that doesn't actually end his powers. He can in the fall. So I do believe that he'll negotiate a way to say the emergency has ended because we've given him an off ramp for eviction moratorium and everything else. But in the fall, when seasonal influenza, if that were to kill 2 children in school somewhere in Minnesota, he could declare an emergency, implement a statewide mask mandate, and 2 weeks to flatten the curve for seasonal influenza because it's more dangerous to children than COVID. So my proposal, and we introduced House File 28, which is the Never Again bill, actually would change the law so that the governor wouldn't have the ability to give himself unilateral lawmaking authority anymore. And it would be a balance of the legislature and the governor and the courts and everything else to make sure we don't infringe on people's rights.
And I know you are behind this 100%, sir, and I'm not questioning your mental state at all. But any chance that can happen, you had a lawsuit early on in this to get rid of that. The lawsuit doesn't even go anywhere, let alone be able to get guys on the other side of the aisle say, yeah, there really wasn't overreach for us. Let's pull this back. Until you get a Republican on your side and as governor, is there any chance in the world that we could actually get a common sense thing done and said, hey, no longer does one guy take over because, like you say, influenza got bad?
Yeah, well, I certainly think that Governor Walz, as he's campaigning for re-election, would love to tell people, look, I did the best I could during this thing, but now we put in place now so that the commissioner of health has to go to the courts to petition to make these, infringing on people's rights. He needs to be able to tell people it can't happen again, because I think he's going to lose a lot of votes. So I think politically, he would appreciate this language. And by the way, this language was in place for 3 years back in the early 2000s to say if it's a public health crisis, it has to be handled under a different chapter of law, Chapter 144, which involves the commissioner of health and the courts. And of course, the Senate can fire the commissioner. All 3 branches of government are in there. It's what should be put back into place, among a few other things. But I think that law is reasonable. And Julie Sandstead, who's a Democrat in the House, offered this language put that little portion back in. So there is a path, and we're trying to have discussions with the governor and Gazelka kind of behind the scenes on this.
Fair enough. Speaking behind the scenes, we are talking supposedly just 1 week away, the end of this session. When we went into special session on the 14th, don't worry, we'll get it done in 10 days. Not a big deal. We're getting to that 10-day mark. You're inside the knowledge. What's going on? I have exactly 2 minutes. Will this get done in the next week? Are we going into overtime? Is there a shutdown coming up in Minnesota politics?
Well, we've already passed 4 bills, 4 big omnibus bills: the ag bill, the legacy bill, higher ed, commerce, energy. Those have already passed the House and the Senate. So that part of government's going to be funded. Transportation's passed now. That funds billions and billions of dollars of government. That's going to the governor. There's education bill and health and human services have now come to an agreement. We're going to be hearing those soon. The last ones out are going to be the tax bill, which is already in agreement on. State government is already in agreement on that one. The buildup right now is public safety. And if they can't pass the big compromise bill, they could at least put a lights on bill to keep our courts going. And there's a few things that have to be done to fix the judicial system, but they may have to hold up on some of the public safety changes that the Democrats are pushing for, and we can handle that in next year. So I think everything is going to be funded. It's not necessarily my personal opinion. I think we should be addressing the governor's powers, but I think it will be solved by the end of the month.
Fair enough. Let's see if we can get you back in here then. That might be the very last day of session. Can we get you back on next week, sir?
I'll make sure we do it. Sounds great.
Representative Jeremy Munson, love having you on. Thanks for always being honest with me, sir. We'll get you back next week right here on Al in the Afternoon.